In this video, we're going to show you how to tile and grout your wall like a professional. Part 1. Planning. Before you can lay any tile, you have to plan out the layout of the tile. This will not only establish the tile pattern you want to use, but will also let you know how much tile you need. Watch as Andrew goes over the planning stage step by step.
Before tiling your wall, you need to plan the layout of the tiles for both walls and floors. With floor tiles, you simply just lay them on the floor and you can see exactly where they need to go. But a little bit more tricky with a wall. So you have to make yourself a tile gauge. A tile gauge is pretty straightforward. It's just a thin strip of timber and we've actually marked out spaces of our tiles on there. So I've laid the tiles out on the floor, put the tile gauge up next to it, and I've allowed for the grouting obviously. And then you just basically marked up the exact spacing of the tiles. Now the reason for this, well, let me show you. Pretty straightforward. When you're actually laying your tiles out on the wall, they're obviously a standard width. So you use your tile gauge, put it up on the wall. Now you can see here, you can actually have a small tile. So that's not going to look very nice. So you actually want to try and shift it around a bit until you get an even spacing of tiles on both sides. So shift it around until you've got an even pattern, especially if you're going around doors and windows. Reduce costs by planning an edge tile that is half the width of a full tile or less. You will then get 2 edge tiles from 1 cut. Depending if you have taps as well, you need to accommodate for that. So maybe you want to shuffle our tile gauge over a bit so that our tile lines are actually just slightly either side of these taps instead of being randomly a quarter of the way between the taps. It's going to look a little bit odd. So depending on your wall and depending on the joining surfaces, you have to adjust the layout of your tiles accordingly. And exactly the same process from top to bottom. You don't want to have a neat row at the bottom and then a thin strip at the top. The next thing to do is draw a straight line to give our vertical edge where our first row of tiles will actually start. Now obviously we're going to use a spirit level to make sure that we have got it vertical and our tiles are going to look neat and tidy. Just line it up, use the bubble. That's about right. Right, we've got our vertical line in. Next thing to do is to actually mark out where our first row of full tiles is going to start at the bottom. So we actually start at the top, put our tile gauge right at the top, mark off our lines. We're going to join around about there. There we go. That's where our first row of tiles is actually going to start on that mark there. Because you can see that there's not quite enough space for a full tile. So we've got around about a 75–80% tile at the bottom. Now we've got a horizontal point. We're now going to use our spirit level to make a horizontal line that is level. That's the first row of whole tiles that we're going to use. Now to stop those from sliding down when we actually apply them, we're going to put in a wooden border across it to actually hold it up like a fake floor, shall we say. Now straight away you can see our floor is quite unlevel, so we're going to chock that end up to make sure that we get it an even level ledge in line with our line. So we're going to make sure it's exactly level. Perfect, we've got that level. Now just to make sure it doesn't slide out of place, we're going to put some cobblestones in there. But remember, if you're not doing a shower, which is not sealed for waterproofing, you can actually just mount that timber directly to the wall, so it hasn't got to be chocked up. See if our tile fits in place. Perfect, that's easy. We haven't even got the tile adhesive on there yet, and it's able to hold in place, so we know that's going to be perfect once we stick it on. Exactly the same process for the rest of the wall. Chock it up, hold into position, mark up with your tile gauge so you've got your tiles fitting neatly and you don't end up with the small little slithers on the corners. Tiling is a messy affair, so keep in mind to actually remove your tap heads and tape up the remainder. You don't want to get them damaged. A window or door in a tiled wall can be a focal point for a room. So try your best to frame the feature with tiles so they look good. When you have a window and a door on the same wall, Then plan around the window so the tiles frame it. If you're going to be tiling a part of a wall, then make sure you plan from top to bottom. You want a full tile at the top because that's more of a focal point, and then cut tiles at the bottom.
Part 2. Tiling and grouting. Now we roll up our sleeves and start laying down that tile.
Whether you're laying wall tiles in showers, bathrooms or kitchens, the same basic principles apply. Right, we're ready to start tiling now. We've planned out our wall accordingly. We know exactly how many tiles we need, and we've been down to see the guys at Builders, and they've given us the right tiles and the right amount of adhesive as well. Not to mention some safety gloves and some goggles. Remember, depending on the area that you're working, you might want to put down a drop cloth. We're going to be tiling this floor as well, so it doesn't really matter. Start off with the surface, mix up your adhesive, make sure there's the right consistency. Always a good idea just to mix up about a quarter of a batch at a time. You don't want it to be setting and going off. Pretty straightforward. We're going to apply the adhesive. Now remember, we're starting off from our line and going to work our way out, so don't cover your line up. Spread it out, do a few tiles at a time. You always add more adhesive and do the next row. The serrated edge on the tile spreader allows gaps in the adhesive for the tile to squash down neatly onto the wall. Always ensure that you apply it at a 45-degree angle and the same pressure to ensure the consistent amount of adhesive from tile to tile. Starting with our first tile, we're just going to place it in and push it firmly into position. When you apply the tiles, make sure you apply with an even pressure, and it's the same for the next tile. Now we're going to use our spacers. This is what we're going to put in line with the tile to make sure we've got an even gap to allow our grouting to actually fit in there. Now basically we're going to continue laying all the full uncut tiles per row before we move up to the next row. Once that's set, we're then going to start cutting our edge tiles. As you go along between each row, just remove any excess adhesive which has got onto the tiles using a damp sponge. And the same for areas which you aren't going to be tiling for quite some time, like the edges. Remove that excess, otherwise it's going to go hard and it's going to be difficult later on. Hold a spirit level against the tiles horizontally, vertically and diagonally. To check that together, they create a flat, even surface. When all your uncut tiles are placed, measure each edge tile before cutting it, making sure it will fit properly into the space available for it, and taking into account the spaces. When it comes to sections of the taps, you're obviously going to have to cut out your tile. Have a look on episode number 5, we show you exactly how to do that. And remember, when these difficult areas, like on the edges, put the tile adhesive on the back of the tile first, and then squeeze it into place. It's best to leave your newly tiled area overnight to dry fully before grouting it. Grouting is a process of filling in between the tiles. Pretty straightforward. Mix it with water and then spread it on. If it is a little too stiff, just add a little more water. Work on a small area at a time, completing the grouting and cleaning the tiles before moving on to the next section. Before leaving the grout to harden, clean any grout from the surface of the tiles with a damp sponge and run a damp finger or a piece of doweling along the filled joints to create a smooth finish. Leave the grout for 15 to 20 minutes before wiping the tile surfaces again. Once the grout is dry, polish the tiles with a dry soft cloth. You can reduce the tendency of white grout to absorb water by extending the time it takes to cure. To do this, spray it with a mist of clean, cold water 3 times a day for 3 days. This will also strengthen the grout. You can't use this technique with coloured grout, as the extra moisture might dissolve the pigment and so destroy the integrity of the grout. After a few days, you need to apply a grout sealer. The TFC grout sealer comes ready mixed and with a nozzle, so you can just apply it to the grout only. If you do spill over the tile, just wipe it off with a rag. Continue across the rest of the wall, sealing all the grout, and allow it to dry for 24 hours.
Thank you for watching. If you have any questions or would like to hire a professional to do the tiling for you, call 877-592-6929 and we'll connect you to a top-rated tiling and grouting expert in your area. Give us a call.